Welcome, everyone. I am thrilled to join you today for our next Emerging Tech Economic Research Network event. I'm Louise Willard, and I serve as the Executive Vice President and Chief Information Officer here at the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco. EARN events are opportunities for academics, researchers, technologists who are studying the economic impacts of emerging technologies to exchange ideas, learn about research from different sectors, and share insights more broadly with those who are interested in these topics. For those of us at the Fed, they also provide important insights on how developments from emerging technologies can potentially affect productivity, price pressures, and the labor market, all of which are critical to the Fed's dual mandate of stable prices and full employment. Today's installment of EARN event series will explore pricing and productivity in the age of AI through the lens of Amazon Web Services. We are so glad to welcome Jacob LaRiviere, Chief Economist at Amazon Web Services. He will be joined in conversation by my colleague Sivan Leduc, Executive Vice President and Director of Economic Research at the San Francisco Federal Reserve. As Head of Information Technology Services here at the San Francisco Fed, I'm personally seeing how rapid advances in AI are changing the way we approach and leverage technology to optimize business outcomes and change the way we work. So this event promises to be timely and insightful. As a reminder, this event is being recorded and can be accessed on our EARN website following the discussion. Finally, please note that the views you will hear today are those of our speakers and do not necessarily represent the views of the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco or the Federal Reserve System. Over to you, Sivan.
Okay, thank you, Louise. Jacob, welcome to the San Francisco Fed.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's good to see you.
Turns out you have links to the area and California more broadly. I guess you have an office that's not very far from here to start with. And then you did your undergrad at UC Berkeley, grad school at UC San Diego, trained as an environmental economist to start with, taught at University of Tennessee for a few years, then went to Microsoft and then Amazon. I'm curious to start with, what attracted you to the tech sector?
Yeah, so first off, thanks for having me. It's been great to hear from a bunch of people that work at the Fed since this was announced, and I hope it's useful. So so I've always viewed myself as an economist first. And then the topics that I researched initially were environmental, but my slant has always been heavily IO. And so in particular, that sort of took me into electricity markets. And so I've always, and my training is in structural IO. My advisor was a structural IO sort of demand estimation person. And so that's sort of my academic background. And then in terms of the technology sector, I've always been pretty fascinated with it. So when I graduated in 2010, that's right when the very first economists were going into sort of Yahoo Research and eBay. And these are my contemporaries, folks that I was on the market with. And so I've always kept very, very in close contact with them. And then got the R1 job. Research was going great. And when there was a new group that was being formed at Microsoft called the Office of the Chief Economist, I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to apply, and I was the first external hire in that group.
Sounds pretty formal also.
It sounds formal, but Microsoft has this long tradition of doing academic research. And so for me, it was sort of a nice transition into the technology sector. Did that for 6.5 years, and then wound up at Amazon to see a different way of doing it and to work on some of the fascinating problems there.
But you're at AWS, right? Amazon Web Services. It's a little bit different from what the Amazon we know, and maybe like the econ group that is there. Maybe before we start, what are you doing at AWS, and how would that differ from if you had the same job at Amazon, for instance?
Yeah. So AWS is Amazon Web Services. So it's a cloud service provider that effectively provides internet-connected servers, chips, storage, and things like that. And there's a bunch of services that sit on top of it. And so it is not B2C, it's B2B. So that's the key difference. If you think about the history of sort of economists working in the tech sector, it's, you might think of people that are sort of either optimizing sponsored search auctions or folks that are trying to figure out what type of content to show and what type of situations. This is somewhat different. This is really about the efficient allocation of productive resources in a B2B setting. So some differences about B2B is that it's mediated by a sales cycle. So Sylvan, question, what share of the US economy, what share of the labor
asked the
force?
question.
No. So what share of the labor force are salespeople? Guess. Order of magnitude.
Oh God.
Is it 0.1%,
salespeople.
1%, 10%?
So again, point.
1%, 0.1%, 1%, or 10%?
I'd say 10%.
It is.
Here we go.
There you go.
We didn't practice.
There you go. All right, a round of applause. So, the interesting thing here is, like, if you think about it from an economics perspective, what's the fundamental problem that salespeople are solving? It's information frictions, right? And so ultimately, AWS has a ton of really powerful and kind of amazing services that I think customers that are just starting out, like the builders that were some of the first customers are at this point very, very sophisticated, and AWS has tried hard to build services always for our customers at all different strata, whether it's like, the hardcore builders or sort of like more sort of novices that are just getting their feet wet. And if you think about that, solving that information problem can take some time, and so the sales cycles tend to be longer. Mm-hmm. And so that's like the first key difference. A second difference, and it shares a similarity with electricity sectors, is that you got to buy a bunch of stuff, build a data center, and then amortize that down, right? And so that's another, it's sort of more similar to like airlines or electricity sector, or even a hotel or something like that, where you're building this big CapEx expenditure and then you've got to efficiently allocate it. So those are two of the type of core differences, and we can talk about more, but it is different. And so what this means is that it is kind of structural I/O in nature, because the data, you're not getting 1 trillion observations necessarily, every day or whatever it is, and don't quote me on that, but the rate at which your customers are interacting with your product, it's high, but in terms of like the points at which we can help them launch new services and build apps for their customers is it's just different than how it is on .com, the app.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're leading a group of about 60 economists, 50 economists?
60 economists, yeah. So it's a combination of engineers and economists and scientists. And so a key difference between sort of how economists are organized in the tech sector versus, say, like an institution like the Fed or in an academic department is that there's a mix of engineers and scientists and economists. And so what that means is that economists, for example, aren't necessarily running their own models on their client device, right? And so if I ask this room, how many people are running models every month to provide information to policymakers, chances are you are all running models. But on a team like ours, there'd be sort of like an ML dev and an ML ops environment where those models would be run very quickly so that you're not sort of doing that by hand every single month.
So it's interesting you mentioned your knowledge of the electricity market, because one thing we're seeing right now is businesses investing a fair amount in AI. Where you see it, I guess most strikingly, is investment in data center. And so you see it here. Compare, for instance, structures have been pretty flat. And you could think about the office market in particular having gone down around the country. But data center has been really, really powerful. You see this about tripling in terms of real investment over 2.5 years. Yeah. I mean, the demand is so much now that even Google has put out this project, Suncatcher, about 2 weeks ago, where they're exploring the idea of putting data center in space, like to get closer, to have more solar power, because there's just so much demand for energy and for data processing. And you see this also in terms of like just the amount of investment we're seeing in terms of real investment in information processing equipment. So think about computers, think about servers, all the parts that are related to that. You see, like just like recently, the growth rate has been just outstanding, and some of it is diverted by trade because of the tariff, and a lot of the equipment we're buying are imported. But nonetheless, a big chunk of this is just the enthusiasm and the need to invest in AI. And this has been so strong, like stronger than what we've seen during the tech boom of 95, 2005. And so firms are really enthusiastic about this. They're investing, they're positioning themselves. I'm sure Amazon is somewhere in that data. So I guess the question is, what's AWS doing right now? How's your team exploring this new technology on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so a couple things here. First is that, yeah, there's a lot of demand for this stuff. So AWS at Q3 earnings, our growth was accelerating. So it's not like it's decelerating, it's accelerating. And so the demand is real, and different companies and users are using this technology for a variety of things. And it's still very early. It's still very early to where this is, just it's very new. I'll just say that. This is still very, very new technology, and we don't know what it's going to look like yet. So in terms of how AWS is investing, absolutely we're investing in this infrastructure because we want to make sure that we have the capacity that our customers want and to meet them where they are. The second thing is that we're developing new services. And so we'll probably talk a little bit about this later. There's going to be a demo later, and there are a bunch of different services to help people leverage these technologies, like Q, which is sort of like a coding assistant you can think of that can sit in your terminal that you use, or your IDE. There's QCLI. There's other products called Quick Suite that are kind of like fundamentally have the capacity to fundamentally change how people work together. It's pretty remarkable. And so the company's building the infrastructure, developing the services that sit on top to try and meet customers where they are. And then in terms of how we're using it, all the time. And there are some real material gains from this. So like a sharp example from my team is that we have a forecast that we put out on my team. That forecast, we want to expose it so that different people in the business can look at it. And my guess is that there's plenty of raise your hand, if you put out a forecast in this room, and chances are there's more than one person who puts out a forecast in this room, right? So how do you expose that, right? And so the build to expose this in the way that we need it would have taken 3 months using like pre-Gen AI stuff. With our Gen AI stuff, it was 2 weeks. 2 weeks. And so if you think about this, and I think we'll probably talk about this in a little bit, the cost of software development broadly is probably coming down in some dramatic ways. And you can think about how that impacts the macro economy. And for me, it's really exciting, like goosebumps exciting.
So typically you think like there are fixed costs of adopting new technology. You might have to, you have to learn about it. You may need the skills, or I don't know, like in this case, the data environment, the compute environment might be different than what you had before. So I'm wondering if this is true or not, because there's a sense that this adoption rate of the new technology is faster than what we've seen in the past. Maybe like we're all playing on it, but with it, we have it on their phone. There's a familiarity. But to rip the productivity gains, I wonder if firms have to do just more than that, and if there are fixed costs that you're encountering. I'm just curious about that. What are you seeing in your experience at AWS?
Yeah, so there's a couple different things. One, we can talk about sort of like the within org diffusion of this technology, right? And so there's going to be, in any organization, there's going to be the leaders and the laggards for any new technological innovation, right? And so that's certainly the case, and so there's that, and there's tactics that we can use to sort of like increase sort of experimentation rates. But ultimately, it's kind of exciting stuff. It's like, and when you have the aha moment with Gen AI, like I don't know if anybody in this room has had it. I certainly have. I'm sure Sylvain has had if he's playing with this stuff on his phone. But it's it's pretty powerful stuff. In terms of how I think about it, the cloud in general, even pre-Gen AI, has changed the fixed cost of investment in fundamental ways. Because I don't have to, as an entrepreneur, I don't have to purchase the technical infrastructure. I can rent it. And so it's turned a CapEx model into an OpEx model. And that has been huge, right? At least I would argue, I don't know that there is the study that has tried to isolate what the effect of that turning a CapEx into an OpEx is on the macroeconomy yet. I would be curious though, and just from an organizational perspective. And then if we think about sort of the Gen AI component, the thing that's exciting for me is if we think about sort of, and it's not just the cost of software development, it's the cost of like economics research and having smart models and having the right models and things like that to inform policy and new technology creation. But ultimately, there is a fixed cost to develop an app, say. And if the costs of development go way down, the amount of growth that that's going to generate is going to be a function of the sort of shape of that marginal, fixed cost distribution that's right there. And we don't know what that looks like yet. But holy moly, I think that there's going to be some exciting innovation to come out of this. And yeah.
Clearly, like these businesses are investing in AI to become more productive, more profitable. And just to put a little bit of context here, this is just like growth, average growth across a few periods, where we've seen recently post-pandemic in red, compared to what we had, the decade preceding the pandemic, where productivity growth was really slow. But before that, we had this boom in productivity between 95 and 2005. And so, we're not at that level yet, and this may not be completely sustained or AI driven. But I'm wondering at AWS, you have so much data. Like we get lots of people who registered ask questions. A lot of questions were about measurement of productivity, as a matter of fact. And you think about, maybe in manufacturing, it's easier to measure productivity. If you're in the services sector, in the knowledge economy, that's not always easy to measure that. So maybe to start with, I'm wondering if AWS has put out studies, if you've done randomized control trial to try to tease out what does AI do in terms of productivity enhancement, if anything. So anything of the sort that your team has been putting out?
Yeah, so there are teams that have been studying this stuff internally, and what we've been finding is very, it's similar to what the academic literature has been finding, right? Is that it increases velocity and all the good stuff that you would expect just from like looking narrowly at sort of like software developers, where you can look at these outcome metrics that are pretty well defined, like lines of code committed.
More quantitative.
Exactly. And so, yeah, we've certainly been doing that. And we're finding, like I said, similar stuff to what the academic literature is finding.
Do you find that it increases productivity for the least performing worker? Do you get that? That's a finding you often get in the literature also.
I'm not the right person to answer exactly sort of like in the minutia what happens there. What I've been focused more on is understanding how to sort of improve adoption for my team, and then thinking about how to look at how it can change like cost to serve our customers, and how we can benefit our customers directly by sort of like having more innovations for them. And so if you think about like the number of like product releases and stuff like that hit the mark for our customers, that's sort of how I've been thinking about it. And then if we think more broadly of like what is the impact and how to measure this stuff, I think it's a really challenging problem, right? And I think that there's the two schools. One is the partial equilibrium school, where it's like, oh, we're going to look at the lines of code and we're just going to say the production process is exactly what it is right now. And for that exact same production process, what's the change? And that's sort of the partial equilibrium view. And there's some good internal validity if you can do some randomized control trials and things like that. The challenge is that if we think of the general equilibrium model, this technology, if there's ever a candidate for a technology to really drive dramatic sort of labor, like productivity improvements, this has all the attributes of that, right? It's pretty kind of remarkable. And so if I ask you, like 15 years ago, how many people are going to be working on decentralized digital currencies that run on blockchain in the Bay Area, and what's the total market cap of that going to be? If I asked you
I wouldn't
15
have made
years
a
ago,
forecast.
you'd be like, "What? What are you talking?" It's like, and so it's really hard to get those general equilibrium estimates. And so I think respecting that, if we think of how do we actually estimate what this stuff is, and just understanding what we can know and what we can't, is, I think, useful.
Right.
And
So you want to
having
be
that.
guided by the experiments and the science maybe, but not blinded by it either.
Not blinded by it at all, because a lot of this stuff is going to be lower bounds, because you're
So
really focused on the partial equilibrium.
where did you see the biggest improvement, like right now, in with your team?
Yeah. So there's a couple different dimensions. One is like the example that I just gave you, where it's like we're just the stuff that we were already doing, we can go faster. And then the other thing is that we're actually developing new technologies to use this. And so like the development of agents, and so like data mining agents, to where we can look at how we can better serve our customers and build better products for them, and meet them where they are in ways that are fast and interrogable. And so that, not the type of stuff where we're just getting, say, an insight using a natural language interface, but we're also looking at SQL code that is generated from the agent and then run on, it's actually executed on databases, and you can investigate that it has been executed on the databases. So having the interrogable layer as well. And so there's both the partial equilibrium, it's again this partial equilibrium story, and then the general equilibrium story of how we're sort of able to move faster through these new technologies that our team's developing, and then also using the products that AWS is actually developing. And so there's this product called QuickSuite that's pretty remarkable. And so I don't know if has anybody even used QuickSuite yet? So what you can do is you can create a knowledge base. So think of my team. My team's been around, that I'm fortunate to lead. I mean, these are really smart people. I have a really good, really awesome job, because just like here, my guess is that you have a bunch of smart cookies. So what is the sum of all the research that this group has put out in the past, say, 5 years? You've probably written a lot of papers and written a lot of code and stuff like that. Put all those documents into a knowledge base, and then be able to hit that knowledge base with natural language querying and like hypothesis generation, where you used to have to wait, and if I wanted to find out about something about risk premium, I have to call up Bauer, and then he has to tell me who to talk to, and then so on and so forth. And this game of telephone. You can just go to your knowledge base, query it directly, and then get to the answer so soon, and that lets you get to the value add that you are going to create as a specialist, as a researcher, in the economy very soon. And so a lot of these, it's exciting.
At the same time, like the models have improved tremendously in 2 years, but they're not perfect. So what guardrails are you putting to make sure that what you get is really right? That when you call Michael Bauer, it gives you like the right answer.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the interrogable component, right? And so having the citations, and as a researcher, making sure that in particular as an economics researcher, making sure that what the output is interrogable is, I think, really, really important.
Right. Okay, so many people that are online now are students, and they have lots of questions about what it means for entry-level jobs, what kind of skills they have to develop to be productive in the new workforce. And I think some of it might be coming from like you sense a little bit of anxiety, of course, and some of it I think is coming from this, like this idea that the unemployment rate of recent college graduates have been more elevated than the average unemployment rate in the U.S., which was not the case before. There are different reasons for this, but it captures the attention a little bit that maybe AI is eliminating some of these positions, and so it's creating a little bit of anxiety for people who are still in college right now. So I'm just wondering, like in your experience, how has that played out at AWS? Are you demanding less entry-level skills? Are you posting less or not?
Yeah. So to start with, if you look at this curve, I think that you can cut the data to say like, okay, look at the green line relative to the blue starting in 2022 or whatever, and oh no. But if you go back to 2010, I mean, you can see that green and blue, this is like a longer term thing. And I think that if similar to this partial equilibrium, general equilibrium story, there's just a lot going on in the economy. I think that the demographic changes with the baby boomers and figuring out how all that stock of like, highly experienced folks relates to sort of new hires. I think that's really tricky. And so it's again this partial equilibrium, general equilibrium story from a research perspective. In terms of our group personally, we're actually hiring more younger people into our group. Just anecdotally, what happened is a lot of tech companies hired a lot during COVID, right? And then hiring sort of stalled out. And so now what happens is the organizations are, at least my organization that I ran, was a little bit sort of like thick in the middle and a little top heavy. And so getting back to that sort of nice shape that we would traditionally have has meant to actually more junior hiring. And so that's
reassuring.
it is. It's and then furthermore, I think that it's again this partial equilibrium, general equilibrium story where like I teach at University of Washington still. I teach one class a year, and the students that I'm teaching that are juniors and seniors are going to be native to using coding assistants.
Right.
And nobody that has like, at least in my vintage, I am not native to a coding assistant, right? I learned, like I was telling Sylvain earlier, I learned C++ in the 90s, right? And there was no coding assistants back then. And so these younger folks are going to be doing some amazing things with this technology because it's going to be baked in to their workflows. And they're going to be going so fast. And fortunately, they're going to need some experienced folks to make sure to guide them. And so I think from my perspective, it's like, should people like Sylvain and me be the folks that are worried here, so that we don't get lapped by this new generation?
So do you think they have to have different set of skills? Are you looking for different set of skills when you're on the market for new economists?
I think for me and for my group, the types of folks that tend to be successful in technology companies I think that's going to be kind of fixed. It's sort of like a bit more of like an entrepreneurial component to it. That doesn't mean that it's not the other things, but I think that making sure that people are invigorated by creating technologies and policies and products that help people and that help our customers at AWS, that's the bedrock of things. And really wanting to change the real economy in ways that make people's lives better.
Like just on demand and meeting the customers a little bit. If you back up a bit from Amazon, we hear a lot about dynamic pricing, for instance, and you could think that AI is just ripe for that because it can analyze so much data. Are firms using this for that? Are they using it for pricing in general? What are you seeing?
The short version is right now, like our team is not working on any sort of like generative AI real-time pricing. Where we are using it is to understand our customers better, and
like preferences and what they
and like what does good look like for that customer, and understanding what good looks like and what makes customers happy, and then doing more of that stuff and still experimenting on things, but kind of quickly identifying what is not sort of creating value for them and then what is. And so if I think about the Fed and its mandate, I think one exciting thing could be using novel types of data. So if you think of 10 years ago, there was the Texas data paper, or I don't know, how old is Texas data now? I'm not sure. But pretty old, yeah, exactly. Pretty old. So I think ultimately what large language models can be good at is putting structure onto unstructured data. They're really good at creating hierarchies in sort of complex data structures. And so I think that, using aggregated data like weekly summary statistics, that's a way of doing it, but I'm curious and I'm excited about the idea of using novel types of data and then letting the LLM figure out where signal is from an economics research perspective, and then creating good policy as a result of that. And so like some more agent-based modeling that could come out of that, I think could be exciting.
30 minutes on this topic just flies by, and so we're already about time now. But maybe like some parting thoughts. What do you think is what surprised you the most about this AR journey so far?
So it has been fast. The pace of development of these services and these tools is just really fast. And part of that is due to the speed with which the tools enable development. Another surprising thing has been the diffusion within companies. And so this, if you think of as an economist researcher and you say, okay, when does this company adopt AI? And you're defining that as the first user in that company first adopts some product, there is a within company diffusion curve. And so you're going to have a lot of measurement error in trying to figure out sort of what the downstream impact of that is for that company. And so I think some things like the pace,
Right.
the impact, honestly, the impact and the ability to change modalities, like with QuickSuite and the sort of like knowledge base where you take all your documents and now you can sort of query them. I think that can really change how people work and how people interact in the workplace. And like I said, we are early days. We're still in the early days for cloud service providers in general. Like it's still early.
Mm-hmm.
And then Gen AI is, what is it? A couple years old? This is so early. And so it's really exciting.
Well, this has been fantastic discussion. Thank you so much for your time. You've given us a lot of information to consider as we're, continue on our journey here and thinking about adopting Gen AI. For those of you who are following us, our next event will be on December 15, where my colleague Huyu Lee is going to have a discussion with Rafaela Sadoun, who's kind of an expert on management and productivity. And so please join us then. But for the time being, Jacob, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.